Hey, I got a question I'd like to ask you guys and have you weigh in on it. The question is, for all the accessories in the frame, do I go with a brown like this, real dark, or perhaps darker, or, you know, the old black? Welcome to Urban Monk TV. Hey, thanks to everybody who provided their comments and thoughts, and the verdict is it's not black. It's gloss dark walnut. Something was telling me I can't go with another black framed motorcycle. And yet, you know, I have to agree, the leather brown, as the manufacturer called it, was a little light. I think what I'd like to do is keep, you know, those components of the frame dark, hidden, but still not black, and just have some of the light brown be, you know, a couple of accents, maybe one or two at the most, like the seat and the hand grips. And I don't know that I'm going with these, but I do kind of like them. They actually feel pretty good. So that was my decision there. Thanks again, you guys, for all of your thoughts and comments. I really appreciate that. So let's be clear on color. Black is always going to work, you know, as far as your accessories go. The frame, the master cylinder, your handlebars, whatever. Black is kind of the most basic background you could have, maybe other than white. So it's always a viable option, and clearly I've gone with a brown that's nearly black, but because the light was just not working. But I've seen motorcycles that have bright colors for frames, and it comes out looking good. So it depends on how bold you want to be and what part of the motorcycle you want the focus to be on. For me, I've spent a lot of time on this gas tank, and I've used my inspiration, which is another thing I'll talk about in a second, for, you know, the crux of the visual impact of my bike, to be the gas tank and the seat pan that I'm working on. These will be the elements that people just first notice, other than kind of the overall look of the thing. And then now back to inspiration. If you're struggling with ideas and maybe just not feeling creative, maybe you got an idea of a color, but how has that color or a very similar one been used with success by other designers, maybe even in other industries? And one of the things that I like to follow on social media and coffee table books that I buy are classic cars and architecture. A lot of design happening in those two worlds. And so I'm a big fan of 1960s mid-century modern architecture, especially like the California modern. And you know, pretty much the same era on cars. If you go to the 50s, well, in the 40s everything was black, because you could have any car, you could have your car in any color you want as long as it was black. That was kind of the big joke of the time. And 50s seemed like everything was kind of silver. You had Corvettes that were throwing some color in there by 1953, 54. But in the 60s, there was a lot of real fun colors being used. 70s, a lot of fun colors. By the time you get to the 80s, then, you know, cost control measures and things like that came into processes, and we just wanted to make thousands of cars and thousands of motorcycles with a pretty limited set of colors, and we want them to sell, but we also want them to be kind of cheap. And you saw less bold statements being made with color in the 80s and beyond. So really, I think the 60s and 70s are kind of the best place to be looking for color combinations used in anything that has an artistic design to it. Just some thoughts. You know, I got my gas tank paint scheme idea from a 60s era Porsche 911, and while the actual Porsche was just slightly more of a cream than this canvas white, the inspiration worked, and I'm just really thrilled with how this tank has come out. And so a little bit on paint color choice. Back at the seat pan a little bit here. So last time we talked about this thing, I had added some material to this area, and because I needed to bring it in from this side, I've now done that, and I can show you how I went about it. So it's fitting my frame pretty well, and it's meshing up with the tank better. Now I've got straight lines coming up here and coming up here. Of course, this is all going to take some fine tuning with Bondo or body filler, but I still have the warp to it that I have to deal with, because on this side, sorry for the bad camera work, you know, I'm coming up pretty level all the way back, but on this side I got to tweak. So I'm going to find a way to build a frame for this thing to bring it into, let's say, the word straightness. I'm going to coin the term straightness. What I'm finding is if I just tweak it right here, it straightens all out. So if I just need to flatten this area, this should come in line because it's all tied in. So I think if I build a frame in here, and then, you know, that can just become a permanent part of the seat pan, should slide right down there. The other option is to start over, but I just don't feel like quitting yet on this one. I'm rethinking this a little bit. So here I was just talking about building a frame under here to make this rigid, and then I put it this way, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to put a frame that's rigid underneath it. A frame that's rigid underneath it. I already have that. So I started just playing with it here, and when I get it in place and start pushing down, everything straightens out pretty good. So I think I just need to start working on my mounting. So for mounting, I need a couple of holes here, a couple of holes here, and rather than go down through the seat pan first, I'm just going to drill the holes here, then put the seat pan in place, maybe clamp it, or maybe ask someone in my family to hold it for me, and I will drill up from underneath to get a perfect match on the holes between the pan and the frame. And before I get crazy with drilling holes, I just want to think a little bit about how I will interact with this and how the seat pan interacts here. So, you know, I put the seat pan down, got a good eye for where I want the holes as far as how far in from the sides, but the other piece is I'm going to have wing nuts up underneath here that I use to secure the whole thing down, and I'm going to need to be able to reach those and spin them. So I don't want to be so close to the frame tube that I can't fit that wing nut. So, but at the same time I want to be as far out as possible because this thing tapers in, and I'm trying to get some kind of pull from the sides, so the closer I am to the center, the less of that pulling force I'll get. So I got to make a compromise, and I'm thinking here will be safe. Actually, let me punch these to get a good start. And I can start on that. And so I'm in about that far. Start with that. Start with a pilot hole and then work your way up. And as far as the ultimate hole size goes, I think I'll use 6mm bolts here. So I'm grabbing a drill bit that for my top height. That's a 1/4 inch drill bit here in the US, SAE measurements. So 1/4 inch is 6.64 millimeters, so that'll be just a little bit bigger than a 6mm. Should work perfect. Oop, too much. Okay, hey, there's a lesson here. I took a shortcut and I paid the price. You ever wonder why on these old chucks there's 3 holes for the key that you tighten the chuck with? I only did 1, and sure enough, now as I go back around, you really should do all 3 if you really want that chuck snug around your bit. Because when it catches like that, you need it tight. Okay, so again, just to be sure I am in far enough, frankly, yeah, anywhere, this is easy. The tricky part here is I'm starting to drill at the top of a round surface, so having a punch to guide that initial drill bit is going to be critical. Okay. Now, I'm going to get through here, but then I got to think about going perfectly straight. So I'm going to look at, this plane and this plane. And they better be 90 degrees. Okay. And if I am not, I can break this drill bit off really easily, the small ones. Okay. Nice. I don't want to touch that bit because it's hot, but okay. Straight. I start out slow just to make sure I stay in my punch mark, and then I can kind of kick it up after that. Next size up. And finally my 1/4 inch 6.64 millimeter with the chuck tightened in all 3 positions. Okay. These are some 6 millimeter bolts I have laying around. These are not the bolts I will use. I need to go to the hardware store and find something with a flatter head, but they clearly fit my holes very nicely. Okay, so I ran to the hardware store and got some bolts or screws, 6 millimeter, that will run down through here. I originally was thinking I would need, from here to enough length to get the wing nut on. I also bought wing nuts and washers and lock washers. But it got to thinking that, wait a minute, I have to mount the upholstery to something here, and you got to be able to staple into it. And so my intention is to have a thin piece of plywood that fits in this space, that the upholstery will be mounted to, stapled to, but this is going to be in that plywood and kind of a permanent part. So the plywood piece will go down with the upholstery and these screws will come through. So essentially you got them going through, well, 3 layers: the plywood upholstery, the fiberglass seat pan, and then through the frame, if that makes sense. So I got 60 millimeter, hoping that's long enough. I don't want them too long, and I didn't want to make a big project out of cutting them off if I bought really long ones. Frankly, these were the longest they had at my local hardware store, in 6 millimeter. And then the other thing I'm going to need is something to fill the gap between the underside of the pan here and this piece right here. And another Cafe Racer build did a really nice video recently on making your own neoprene bushings, and I thought, man, that'd be the way to go. But he's got some pretty nice machining tools obviously at his disposal that I don't have to make the mold, and I just wanted to get kind of the quick budget route. Not that his route isn't a budget route. I don't think he spent a great deal of money, but I want something that's got a little cushion to it. I was thinking that I could use some pipe at first, and but then I got to thinking that maybe a rubber stopper would be a good thing. So I bought one that I can cut in half and drill a hole through it, and that should provide, I think, enough height here. So I don't know, I gotta see how things line up under here. Actually, now that I look at it, I should have bought 2 of these. So when I get my seat pan in place, which would be right there, the gap I need to fill is right up in here. I can see that it's a little more than half the height of this rubber grommet. So I need 2 of them. I just kind of eyeballed this, but that was easy to cut off simply with a box cutter. This would be a little tricky because, I can put it in the vise, but not real tight or I'm compressing it. I may just want to, sorry to say, hold it in my hand and drill it. I don't know. Yeah, this is the way to go. I'm seeing a mess happening though. I'm going to go do this over the trash can. Don't try this at home, kids.
I thought about screaming after the fact and I didn't do it. That would have been fun.
It most certainly does. Quite nice. Okay, one. Okay, so I've got one screw in, which is now anchoring this corner of, call this a rectangle. And now I can just get everything else set where I want it. And now with 2 points anchored, I can do a third. So you remember I just cut off, of course you remember, you just saw it. I just cut off one of those rubber stoppers, and when I had it in place, I was thinking, okay, that's great, but not a good line here. And I realized that I shouldn't have cut it. That the full-size rubber stopper is pretty much perfect. So, another full-size rubber stopper without trimming it down so that I have two, and it's working pretty good. And I gotta say, at this point, catching that line might have been quite a bit more difficult had I not had this motorcycle lift. Having this bike up off the ground made catching that error in progress so much easier, and kind of unconsciously, like I just happen to have my eyes down here because it's easy to get my eyes down here. If I were working on the ground, well, let's put it this way, if you're not going to get a motorcycle stand, then spend some time on your butt on the ground next to your bike and pay attention to your lines. Let's put it that way. This isn't absolutely necessary, it really isn't, but it did help me there. Then I'm just going to drill my final hole, I think from this side. Yeah. Okay, so now having both rubber grommets and 4 screws in, I'm setting pretty good. I've got some body filler work I need to do to clean up that edge, but that is our next step. So I'm going to do a little body filler work here on places like this, and so I want to do it on the frame. I just feel like I need to see this thing in place while I do this kind of work. So I just wrap some plastic wrap around the frame and the gas tank to protect it from the body filler, so I'm not sanding that off later, and certainly don't want it on my paint. Okay, so I've got Bondo all around the edges that are not going to be covered by seat. These are essentially all the areas that are going to be thinned out. You may be saying, man, is that not even remotely close to smooth right from the get-go? And clearly that is a correct thought. Here's what I'm challenged with here is it's very warm in Southern California right now. I've been sweating all day out here, and that warm temp is making the Bondo cure super fast. And I was just more concerned with getting the stuff on and, pressing it down, and less concerned with how, well, clean the surface is because I can sand it down. So, you know, this is it. So I think that's going to be it for this weekend, you guys. I've run out of time, but we've got, well, a little bit on color, and then we've made some more progress with the seat pan. Next week, of course, I have to let this cure, and then we can sand, and we will continue the Cafe Racer project. I wanted to leave you with one more thing, and I was watching an interview with, gosh, how do I tell this story briefly? I played drums. Many of you may have picked that up at some point. I had the opportunity to play Heart of the Matter by Don Henley. And this is a song I've heard on the radio time and time and time again, but I had never really sat down and listened to the words. And then playing the drums on it was just struck by the perfect simplicity of the songwriting and the song construction, especially as pertains to my instrument, the drums. So got a little hooked on Don Henley, searching some stuff on him, and I find an interview between him and Billy Joel. And Don Henley was quoting Henry Thoreau. I believe he has, well, I don't believe, I know now from watching the video that he has a nonprofit organization that is saving the woods where Henry Thoreau lived when he was doing his famous writing. So I wanted to leave you with a Henry Thoreau quote, because some of you may be watching this and saying, you know, I can't do that. I can't take a motorcycle completely apart and put it back together, but you may have the longing to do it. And rather than doing it, like I happen to be, you may be coming up with a lot of excuses as why you can't. And maybe you have legitimate excuses. I'm not passing judgment on anybody, but I used to do the exact same thing. I'm too busy. I have a family. I've got kids. I, work. Blah blah blah. I don't have time, and I really don't have a lot of time, and that's why this project is taking as long as it is. But I am doing it. So here's a quote: Henry David Thoreau. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. If you want to build a motorcycle, just do it. And hey, see where it goes. Maybe you'll never get it back together and get it running. I think you will, with some tenacity and commitment. And don't be in a hurry, but live your life. Build the motorcycle. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing, click the thumbs up and subscribe. And if you are subscribed, you can hit the little bell for alerts when I post up a new video. I don't have a set schedule for it because my life doesn't allow. So they come up when they come up, and you can get notified. I really appreciate you guys watching, and hope you have a great week. Take care.